Oregon began the nation's most innovative treatment program. But does treatment work for meth addicts? Reporter Steve Suo tried to find an answer by comparing Oregon's program with those of other states. But what the numbers revealed was something quite different, and so unexpected that Suo thought he'd made a mistake. In every state, the number of people entering rehab rose and fell in unison, even though the states had radically different programs. Then Suo compared the number of arrests and emergency room admissions in those states, and he found the same pattern. Over the years, there had been huge simultaneous spikes in meth use, and then huge fall-offs. Suo became obsessed with figuring out why.
It's a lot like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where he has this image in his head of this mountain, and he doesn't know what it means, but he just feels compelled to tear up his yard and build this giant mound in his living room, and ultimately that leads him to the answer. I didn't get any aliens out of it, but I got some pretty interesting answers.
The answers lay in the very chemistry of the brain of a meth addict.
You see the judgment center, the reward
Suo learned about the neuroscience of meth from Dr. Richard Rawson of UCLA.
It has most of its effect via dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's primary pleasure chemical. When people do things that the brain wants to reward, it releases dopamine. This is the slide that we use to illustrate the principle that one orgasm equals 2 cheeseburgers. Probably not true, but that's what this represents. However, in terms of dopamine release, the mother of them all is methamphetamine. You get an increase from this base level to about 1,250 units. It produces a tremendous release of dopamine. The brain isn't designed to produce this kind of a release. This really doesn't occur from any normally occurring rewarding activity. That's one of the reasons why people, when they take methamphetamine, they report having this euphoric experience that's unlike anything they've ever experienced. Now, what happens when that occurs? When you take that drug and you put it in your brain over and over and over again because you like that spike of dopamine, it actually changes how the brain operates.
What researchers have discovered is that meth creates its rush of euphoria by altering the part of an addict's brain that generates dopamine.
They experience it as an inability to experience pleasure. Everything feels kind of gray and hopeless, and nothing feels good. And so in their mind, the only way they're going to feel better is to take more methamphetamine, and hence you have relapse and people going back to using. So wonder any meth users ever get better.
965, you don't need anybody else on 130?
The research showing that meth might be the most addictive drug there is suggested to Steve Suo that one of the few things that might explain the eerily consistent rise and fall in the number of addicts was if the meth itself were changing. For instance, what if the purity of the meth on the nation's streets had been rising and falling? To find out if he was onto something, Suo gathered data on the purity of the meth seized by the government in various states over the years. Remarkably, the purity of the meth sold on American streets formed the pattern of the mountains.
It was really exciting. I mean, it was a perfect match. And you just don't often see that in data. These things were lining up on my screen, and suddenly I had an explanation.
Suo's groundbreaking discovery was that it was the change in the purity of the meth that addicts were using that had caused the rise and fall in the severity of the epidemic over the years. But the solution of one mystery only produced an even greater